Have you ever had that circumstance in life where you feel like you've given a good recommendation? I'm talking perhaps you've given a good recommendation for a restaurant, or maybe a movie. In my case, it tends to be a little bit more entertainment based, such as a television show or a video game. In my rather lengthy video game career, I can think of two standouts, first of which is the Legacy of Kain series, which one day I really hope to be able to do a review on someday. The other is a little bit more obscure, at least in my opinion. This video game discovery that I'm thinking of first came to me in the late 90s in the form of XCom Apocalypse, which then followed up many years later just on a chance encounter with XCom Enemy Unknown, at the time on the Xbox 360. Both of these games are separated out by some years worth of technological advancement in the world of gaming, and you can definitely tell the difference. With XCOM Apocalypse coming out on the PC, and then XCOM Enemy Unknown being on the PS3, Xbox 360 generation of consoles, you can definitely tell the difference between the capabilities of the engines. That being said, there are some recurring themes that carry on between the entire series. XCOM is kind of like a X-Men meets Ghostbusters theme, but instead of ghosts, you're hunting aliens. And like the X-Men, the XCOM forces fly all over the world to combat a major global menace. When I learned that there was going to be a sequel to XCOM on the next generation consoles, XCOM 2 was immediately targeted. I picked it up, I took it home, I played it, and I have a lot to say about it. Then there was a lot of downloadable content that came along with the game, which I also got, and we're going to talk about that too. So this is a casual review to the XCOM 2 collection, primarily that of XCOM 2 and War of the Chosen for the PS4. XCOM 2 was originally released in 2016 by Firaxis Games, and was a little unique in my opinion, because it looks like a third-person shooter at first glance, but it's actually a turn-based strategy, which is a consistent theme throughout the series. For this pros versus cons analysis, we'll be covering content from the original XCOM 2 game, as well as the DLC, primarily War of the Chosen. There's an awful lot of material here, so let's go ahead and get started. For starters, let's begin with the pros. When it comes to sequels, video games tend to have an advantage over movies. Video games usually show advancement that is hardly guaranteed in film. XCOM Enemy Within was a good game. XCOM 2 definitely builds on it. Just a quick note, minor spoiler alert. There'll be some spoilers in the story, but nothing too huge. The game's been out for a few years already, so I'm not that worried about it. Taking place 20 years after the events of Enemy Within, XCOM 2 nails a canon story in which we lost to the alien invaders. I absolutely love the story setting. Years of supposed cooperation with the aliens known as the Elders has created a false utopia. This is the basis of the story. As I'm looking around the alien society, I just am getting these mental images of people saying, "Be well." The alien faction primarily serves as the official world government, referring to themselves as Advent. This is an antagonist I love to fight against. It's pretty clear very quickly in the game that Advent is very full of themselves. Even the load screens provide an atmosphere of elder propaganda that reminds me of old school World War II or any modern corrupted dictatorship. These load screens are amazing. And I'm just going to let the sound play for a moment. There's almost a hypnotic brainwashing feel to them. Take a listen. Better get used to those load screens, though. We'll get to that. Going back on topic, yes sir, Advent equals happy life. There are several hints that a lot is amiss, though. Clinics which people have to report to. Yeah, that's normal. Full police state control? Yep, perfectly normal. There's also a running gag of juicy Advent burgers that no one seems to know where the meat comes from. I'll leave that to your imagination. So where is XCom in all of this? Well, they're the outlaws, the bandits, the terrorists. Take your pick. How did they lose? The story canon states that the aliens actually captured you, the commander of XCom. They basically took a page out of the Borg playbook from Star Trek and plugged you into their system to get a victory. This definitely gives me the warm and fuzzies. The tutorial mission at the beginning of the game is actually a play to rescue, again, you, the commander. Once you are liberated, the implants are removed, and you are nursed back to health in order to give Advent a well-deserved uppercut. Your right-hand man is a guy by the name of Central. He basically runs the show right behind you. He also actually looks 20 years older than the last time you saw him in Enemy Within. Poor guy. He's been beat down for 2 decades, and is now looking to you to get XCOM back in gear. Several references are also made to characters and creatures in the previous game, so there's a lot of story development. The next couple of missions center around upgrading the Adventure. This is actually a totally awesome mobile base. I guess you can compare it to a shield helicarrier. Once it's launched, it's essentially a repurposed alien ship and a very worthy juggernaut to call home base. So let's recap where we're at so far. We've broken out the commander, and now we have the Avenger up in the air. Now it's time to go out and crack some alien skulls, bust out some guns, and get on some missions. I have to admit, the game makers really did know how to set the stage for an exciting story, an exciting game. I'm pretty jazzed. But it's by no means going to be easy, which brings me to my next pro. We have a believable resistance movement, but they are at a disadvantage, and it shows. The challenge in this game is just stupid ridiculous at times, and I would love to elaborate. Geez, where do I begin? Do I talk about the missions? Do I talk about the enemies? Do I talk about the time constraints? There's a lot of different directions. Let's go ahead and start with the time constraints. XCOM 2 is in a constant race against the clock. The primary driver of this is the Alien Avatar Project. It's basically the science project that serves as the automatic win condition for the enemy. If it fills up, timer goes off. If the time reaches 0, game over. Period. Slowing this thing down is challenge enough. Fortunately, if you play your cards right, at some point it is mathematically possible to slow down the Avatar Project to the point where you keep it down indefinitely. Achieving this is probably the best way to get full replay value of the game and experience all the features it has to offer. Speaking of cards, it's appropriate to bring up because there are several features in XCOM 2 that gives it the feel of a very difficult co-op board game. Every month, events appear on cards that pop up that can not only slow your progress, but essentially screw you over at the most inconvenient times. Fortunately, you can counter these dark event cards with cards of your own. It really reminds me of a Saturday night board game night. And like those board games, you can lose. And that's what I love about this game. If things go wrong, it can be impossible to recover, at which point you might as well start a new game, or a new save. There are many different mission types in the game, ranging from guerrilla attacks, raids on enemy facilities, special council missions, retaliation missions that come from the aliens, rescue operations, assassination plots, or maybe you just need to C4 the enemy base. Each mission type has potentially different results or benefits, so choose carefully, especially early in the game, because your rat tag XCOM force depends on it. I personally love the Skyranger rides to the mission site. Skyranger is the transport that you ride on to get to the missions. They go over the briefings and the objectives. Your guys are looking pumped. I get pumped too. I mean, look at this deployment animation. I don't know why I love it so much. Here's an example of a mission where we have to eliminate or capture the enemy VIP. Personally, I prefer capture. Usually. A quick pop to the head knocks him out. Let's get ready to extract. Okay, people, let's secure the zone until we get the package ready for extraction. Why is this person so heavy? Oh crap, more enemy reinforcements. Time to get the heck out of Dodge. Enemy reinforcements will just keep on coming too, so it's usually best just to get out of the mission if you can, unless you get the situation thoroughly under control. As you get deeper in the game, you'll notice that the enemies as a whole just get harder and harder, which is part of the challenge factor. And man, they definitely made it challenging. After the mission, you ride home on the Sky Ranger. Some stats are given, and once you get back to base, you get to apply promotion, if any promotions were earned, and you get to go over the loot spoils from the mission itself. The ride home on the Sky Ranger will either be mega happy if you had a good mission, or super somber if you had a bad one, especially if there are casualties. Especially if there are a lot of casualties. Yes, let's talk about that. Because in this game, for most people, there will be casualties. This game can be very unforgiving at times, especially when you have an oops moment. And trust me, I've had a lot of oops moments. Take a look at this. When you run up a ladder, and you see all these aliens there all of a sudden, your position is compromised and you're in combat. And guess what? You have a soldier that's completely on his own, and that usually equals dead XCom soldier. So yeah, casualties. I've played through this game often enough just to know it's really that difficult. It's really tough to get through the game without acquiring a single casualty. So I've just grown to accept it, especially if I'm dealing with an ultra mega difficult mission. It's just better to accept it, take your losses, and move on with life. Otherwise, you can drive yourself crazy with it. The adventure also has this neat little bar/memorial section in which you can view your fallen comrades. There's a plaque that has their photo, how many missions they were on, how many kills they had, a few other stats, including the circumstances and how they were killed. I think the record of how many soldiers I lost in a single mission was 6. It was a special mission. And I think my record in terms of lost XCOM soldiers is somewhere around 25, 30 or something ridiculous like that. When you're playing the game straight up, it's more likely to land like that, at least for a casual gamer. So the moral of the story is, while you're customizing your guys, and yes, we'll talk about customization in a second here, but while you're naming your soldiers after your buddies or that girl you like, just be aware. They could very well easily wind up on that wall, and you're going to have to make a choice, whether or not to accept that loss or give up a successful mission. The choice is yours. You have been warned. Another little minor pro is that your soldiers can also develop negative traits as a result of the mission. They can become afraid of something or react badly to something, and you actually have to psychologically remove that trait from the soldier. So in combination with that, the casualties, the constant race against time, there's a lot of multitasking going on. So many little interruptions will come up while you're trying to accomplish something. It's just plain nuts. And that's what I like about the game. Yep, plenty of challenge to go around. No shortage here. What's that? You want more? Well, fortunately we can oblige that. As you see, one day, the game makers decided to do DLC called War of the Chosen. Let's see how this affected the mix. In my opinion, XCOM 2 already had considerable depth, but this DLC is some of the best that I've ever seen. It blends very well into the game itself. So let's go ahead and see how War of the Chosen plays a factor in the big picture. So who are the Chosen? Basically, they are the big bads. 3 elite warriors out to destroy XCom. And make your life miserable? They do. They have this sniper guy, which is a little overconfident, but he tends to dominate you from long range. Then you have this melee-based assassin character, who in my opinion is the toughest by far. You might be able to get an argument in for me on that one, but it's just my opinion. And they have the psionic guy, which uses all kinds of psionic power attacks. Basically, the way the story goes is the Elders offer one of the Chosen Earth as their personal world to rule if they are able to destroy XCom. Each of the Chosen have like their own little special name. I've never attempted to pronounce it. I'm never going to. But they make the game so much tougher. Taking these guys out is a priority, and it is a process, and you have to fight them numerous times. When it comes to these Chosen, they're just plain hard. Particularly that assassin lady, I can't stress that enough. I can't even count the number of times she's popped up on a random mission, takes down one of my guys, and then stabs another. Next thing I know, she knocks down 3 of my troops. She is one slippery little snake, and taking her out is so satisfying. But she will make your life hard until you get to that point. She'll come in, she'll knock down one of your guys, extract info which she uses against you later. And then there's another time when she kidnaps a soldier. She's actually done it to me 3 times on one campaign once. The other 2 just don't compare to this one in terms of difficulty. That doesn't make the other 2 easy. The problem is, the longer the Chosen are around, the stronger they get. They'll develop new abilities and immunities against some of your attacks. So it's in your best interest to take them off the board as quickly as possible. One time, one of the Chosen actually launched an attack against the Avenger, which was actually the reason why I lost 6 troops in one mission. I'll never forget that. But there is one plus to taking them out. Once you eliminate a Chosen, you gain access to their weapon. And I'm telling you, it is top of the line stuff. Well worth the kill, if you can manage it. When it comes to the DLC, the Chosen was the cream of the crop. The enemy of Advent was already pretty formidable. The Chosen just happened to knock it up to the next level. Here's some additional information on some of the other enemies you might encounter. Actually, will encounter. It's not a complete list, but I'm going to touch on the most significant ones, in my opinion. Advent soldiers are probably the most common enemy you'll come across early on in the game, and there's several types. I don't need to go over all of them. But basically what they are human-alien hybrids, which basically serve as the limitless, expendable bulk of their army. A very worthy adversary, expendable grunt to go against. The one Advent variation that I will talk about is a unit called the Purifier. This was an enemy unit that was added in the War of the Chosen downloadable content expansion pack. Essentially what it is an Advent soldier that is packing a very volatile and nasty flamethrower. This thing really causes a mess and can put a burning status on numerous soldiers. I think it's gotten as many as 3 of my troops in a single go. To make matters worse, if you happen to shoot this thing too close, it's also been known to blow up. This unit has been responsible for probably at least 6 deaths in my latest XCom save. Therefore, whenever I come across this thing, I try to remove it from the board as quickly as humanly possible. I can't stand these things. It's a very love-to-hate kind of enemy. Another common alien that you'll run across throughout the course of the game is a unit called the Sectoid, which basically has your traditional alien look, and it has some psychic abilities that can be pretty challenging. One of the things they can do is it has the ability to mind control your units. Whenever this happens, they could either go into a panic mode if they resist, or they get disoriented, or sometimes, well, worst case scenario is they get mind controlled. If this happens, then the sectoid becomes my immediate target, and it's the first one to die. It's basically a way to put a bullseye on the unit's back, but that's just how I come out. It also has the ability to create zombies off of fallen enemies or comrades. So once again, if this pops up, another bullseye on the sectoid's back. Otherwise, it's not the most lethal unit I've come across, but it tends to throw a wrench into the mission if you don't take care of it quickly. A couple more enemies that you'll come across in the game. One is called the Faceless. This is a shape-shifting alien, which is basically a hulking mass of flesh that'll randomly appear in retaliation missions in the form of a human. When these things are discovered, they're not particularly graceful. They're big, clumsy, but man, they can pack a punch, and can also take out a guy when you least suspect it. Another one is called the Muton. I remember being more afraid of these back in XCom Enemy Within. In XCom 2, they don't seem to be nearly as much of a threat. They can kill just as easily as any other enemy, but I just don't feel the whole gotta kill it right away mentality when I see these. Another creature added in the DLC is a creature called the Lost. This is actually, it plays more like a third faction in combat. It's a zombie style creature, basically alien leftovers that have mutated either living or leftover human corpses. And they attack you in big mass. They're not particularly strong, actually. They're pretty soft targets. They tend to get you most with just sheer numbers, kind of like a TIE fighter. But what makes the Lost kind of interesting is if you kill a Lost through what is called between the eyes, basically you shoot the thing between the eyes and it dies, you get a bonus action. And if you're really good, you can string a lot of kills together. This is easiest to do with the sharpshooter class. You start whipping out a pistol which has no limited ammo, and you can rack up probably a good 11 kills before having to end your turn. It's a good way to build rank. One last enemy type that I want to bring up. Personally, I think the Chosen were worse in terms of overall difficulty, but there was some earlier DLC content for XCOM 2 called Shen's Last Gift, which gave us the alien rulers. Basically, these are 3 king/queen creatures that were designed by a former cast member of the game that, well, their purposes were not really all that clear, but they were very difficult. First of all, they are able to do an action after every single one of your soldiers take an action, so that kind of puts them in an unfair advantage. They have ridiculous health, and if you knock down their health bar one line, they'll open a portal to escape to fight another day. Eventually you do get to kill them because their health does not restore, and you get some sweet bonus items if you are able to essentially kill them and skin them, but they are still incredibly tough. There's a berserker style, and there's this flying type of alien, and then there's finally this snake thing, which I don't know why that bothers me so much, but these rulers were really tough. I've gotten a little sidetracked, so let's go ahead and get back to the pros of the game. I really do like the combat system of the XCOM series for these last 2 games. As stated before, it is turn-based combat. It employs hit point system, which you take your shots and you try to reduce the hit points. Once an enemy reaches 0 hit points, or your guy reaches 0 hit points, you die. Ammo is measured on a little small meter in the corner that once depleted you have to quote-unquote reload. You essentially have unlimited ammo, but it is a little bit more realistic because you do have to reload from time to time. During combat you try to look for cover, which either raises or lowers percentages, and line of sight is pretty important. As I stated before, when I do my little oops, if I run my guy too far ahead or in a bad position, an enemy can flank me, have a clear beat on his position, and then fire on my guy without any cover penalty, which once again usually equals dead XCom soldier, and he winds up on the wall. The combat also employs a variety of different abilities that can be used, but there are just so many to kind of go over, so we'll just go over a brief once-over with the different classes in the game. XCOM does have a variety of different soldier types that were expanded upon in the downloadable content. The first I'll talk about is the Ranger, which is an assault class, which uses shotguns, rifles, and then melee attack swords. During the later stages of the game, you can make the Ranger very useful in string attacks, and it is your primary damage dealer in a lot of cases, especially close range and soft targets. Next you have the Specialist, which branches out into two separate sections. You have your Medical Specialist, which essentially is your healer, very important in the early stages of the game. And then you can also make, which is best described as a Combat Specialist. It's very useful against more mechanized opponents, but both Specialist classes provide additional aid to your soldiers, which gives them higher dodge and defense capabilities. And they also are good for hacking, which is important during certain stages, unlocking doors and getting additional bonuses or resources. Next we can talk about the Grenadiers. That's your heavy weapons demolitions guys. Pretty self-explanatory. They use the grenade launchers, the flamethrowers, the rocket launchers, and the heavier guns, but man, they are not very accurate, especially in the early stages. Things can be done to improve their effectiveness in shooting, but they do have their uses, especially in taking away armor of other opponents. Next we can talk about the Sharpshooters. Those are armed with sniper rifles as well as pistols. Very good for dealing high damage from range, obviously. And then the pistols are very good, like I said before, with stringing multiple kills. They also have a couple of real neat pistol abilities, which you can do some string attacks. And then you have what is called the Psi Warrior. It's got all kinds of strange little powers. I'm not going to get too far in depth with it. But basically you can damage or kill your enemies without the use of ammunition. And you can do some mind control stuff. It's a little bit of a stranger class, but it's fun to use. And then with the DLC, you had some additional add-ons, one being the Spark, which is a robotic guy that plays somewhat similar to that of a Grenadier, heavier weapons. They take forever to fix, but they are not susceptible to mind control. They also have some hacking ability. And then there are three factions that appeared in the DLC: the Templars, the Skirmishers, and the Reapers. Their factions provide different abilities which can be used as cards in your month-end board game festivities. But I'll go ahead and talk briefly about the actual warriors. The first one that you really kind of come across is the Reaper. It's like another sniper-style soldier to use, although it does have some better stealth abilities. Quite frankly, I'm not a huge fan of the Reaper. I'd rather use my own snipers, to be honest. I think they got better abilities, and they're just easier to use. Also, the Reaper Elena that you get, well, she wound up on the wall. Sorry, Elena. Next up, you got the Skirmisher, which is an assault class style soldier. Basically what skirmishers are, they're former Advent troops that have broken free of alien control. They are not that fun to play. I've not really found a good use for them yet. Maybe I'm just not using them right. They have a neat little zipline ability which you can use to get on top of buildings quickly, but this is a class I generally pass up. And then finally you have the Templars. Like the Psi Warriors that you can get, the Templars use psionic abilities as well, but they also have some melee combat capability which are really effective, and they also had some parrying abilities which make them good to send them to the front lines. And overall, that's my experiment class. So it's a lot of units to manage, but they're fun to play, provides a good balance, and provides good teamwork. Side note on the classes, as your XCom army gets larger, it gets tougher to manage. On the field, I found that it's easier just to color code the units based on the type, which brings me to the next and final major pro that I want to talk about, the total customization of characters. People that know me or have watched maybe a couple of choice video reviews from me in the past know that I'm a sucker for customization. XCom Enemy Within and XCom 2 did not disappoint in this regard. You have almost total customization of your characters. You can rename them, you can design their appearance, there's a lot of hair options, hair color options, you can go with themes, and as the armor improves and it gets shinier and better, the customization gets even better. You can also customize the weapons, and if they reach a rank of Sergeant or higher, they get a code name, which you can also change at your convenience as well. Basically, when they hit Sergeant class, that's when I decide, okay, we'll go ahead and color code this soldier, because that means there's a far less chance to wind up on the wall. A word of caution, if you decide to name your soldiers after your buddies or your best friend, just remember casualties. They do happen, and I have lost a buddy to the casualty wall before. And especially if you happen to name a soldier after that girl you like, you might freak out if they happen to get taken out. One of my favorite customization jobs was when I named all my soldiers after Transformers and G.I. Joe characters. That was a pretty cool squad. Before I jump into the cons, one final note, a couple of tips I'll say about this game. First is, make sure you jump on your lab research and your engineering projects as soon as possible, especially gain additional engineering whenever you can. Trust me, this will make your chances of standing up to Advent much better. You also want to expand your squad size to 6 as soon as possible. So once again, engineers, squad size, and research projects. Faster the better. And that means that you will have a better chance of survival. One final tip. In most missions you will have the element of surprise. Therefore, initiate combat on your terms. Take advantage of your sneaking opportunities. Properly position your men, and when you're ready, toss in that nice grenade and take out 3 of your enemies if you can, or at least severely maim 2 of them. You have the opportunity, I suggest you take advantage of it. Now it's time to talk about the cons. For this I have one minor gripe, and then I have one major issue with the game. So let's go ahead and get this out of the way. Time to rip off the Band-Aid. The minor gripe I have is that the hit percentages are either misrepresented, underscaled, or are just flat wrong. There's been way too many times in combat when I've had 54% chance to hit, miss. 60% chance to hit, miss. Even 85% has had an unacceptable amount of missed shots at crucial times. Not to mention when I have a chance to kill something and I need that guy to drop in order for me to accomplish my goal before I get blitzed by 3 other enemies. Somehow that enemy still has 1 hit point left. Very frustrating, but I suppose I could live with it. And now for the biggest con, the biggest gripe, and it's a biggie. The load times in this game. I've never seen anything quite like it. As a matter of fact, they're downright tragic. You remember how I said these postcard style load screens were really cool to look at? And it's a good thing that they're really cool to look at because you have to get used to it. This is why. I've never actually physically timed the load screens, but it's bad. I could probably get up get a soda, make a complete turkey sandwich from scratch, properly plate it nicely, and bring it out to the living room, and the game would still be loading. It's really that bad. But what makes matters worse, the deeper you get in the game, the worse it gets. I've tried to combat this in a variety of different ways, but the interface gets choppier, and then game crashing happens. The game will air out, and you'll get the report the problem to Sony kind of deal, but it doesn't really do anything. I've really hoped that the patches and the downloadable content, at least on the console versions, would remedy this at some point, but it just never happened. The PC version had the same issue from what I've read, and you can patch it to the point where it's fixed, but us console guys are kind of out of luck. Unfortunately, the load times and the choppy interface and the game crashing, even navigating the map gets difficult after a while. But just the poor interaction almost makes the game virtually unplayable. Some players will not tolerate it, and quite frankly, I don't blame them. And it's really a tragedy considering how much I like the game. So let's just cut to the chase. Is the game worth it? In my humble opinion, yes. But I do have a bias towards this series. I would probably put it at a 9 or a 10 if not for the load time issues. The game is really that good, but the load time issues is just such a killer. With that in the equation, most players would probably put it at, could be anywhere from 6, 7. Some players might put it all the way down at a 4 over it. And again, I can't fault them for it. It's really just a big disappointment in terms of what otherwise is an amazing game. Fortunately, the load time issues and the game crashing only happens with later stages of the game for the most part. I've tried to keep the armies more simple, the inventory more simple, give the game a little less data to crunch, but it just doesn't get any better. But anyways, that's just my thought on it. I know this was a long one, but it was really fun to review. I appreciate you listening and watching. This is Mad Marty, reminding you to do what's responsible, avoid what's irresponsible, make the most of what you got, and get respect. Mad respect. See you next time.